How did that go? Catalina, you mocked us. Catalina, you've made a mockery of the Senate for a long time. I think it was a question. Quousque tandem abutera, Catalina, patientia nostra. Quam diu etiam furor istetus nos elude. Quem ad finem se frenate iactaber adaci. Nihil ne te nocturnum praesidium pallati, nihil urbis vigilia, nihil timor populi, nihil concursus bonorum omnium, nihil hic munitissimus abendi senatus locus, nihil horum ora vultusque moverum. Patera tua consilia non sentis. Constrictum iam horum omnium scientia teneri coniurationem tuum non vides. Quid proxima, quid superiore notte egris. Ubi fueris quos convocaveris, quid consiliceperis, quem nostrum ignorare arbitraris. O tempora, o mores, senatus haec intelligit, consul videt. Hic tamen vivit imo vero etiam in senatum venit, fit publici consuli particeps notare designar aculis ad caedem unum quemque nostrum. Nos autem, fortes viri, satisfacere republicae videmur, si estiris furore bactela vitemus. Ad mortem te, Catalina, duci iusu consulis iam pridem apotebat, in te conferi peste, quam tuem nos machinaris. With those very words, on the 8th day of November, in the year of my consulship, I began the first of 4 speeches against Lucius Sergius Catalina, the greatest threat Rome had faced since Tarquinius Superbus marched with his Etruscan army and was stopped by Horatius Cocles at the Sublician Bridge. Just 2 short months later, in the consulship of Silanus and Murena, Roman forces defeated Catalina and his army of traitors, and his personal enemy of all who are good, this public enemy of Rome, this brigand of Italy, was found dead. Is it any wonder that the grateful citizens called me Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland? Yet it was not for glory that I risked my life, the life of my dear family, and my reputation, as I exposed those in high places who were seeking the downfall of Rome, like Cincinnatus, who left his plow in the field and walked straight to Rome in her hour of need. Cincinnatus, a humble man who used his gifts to serve his beloved homeland. So I, the son of a fuller from Arpinum, did only what any true Roman would have done when Rome called upon him. That was then. This is now. Now it's 20 years later. The only ones calling my name want me dead. I haven't shaved in days. I was always a good writer. I suppose that's why I'm writing an account of my life. People always think I did the things I did for glory. That's probably what they'll think. This biography, too. That was never the case. I loved this republic. Well, not this republic. If this even is a republic we're living in. But the republic that was founded on the ashes of the kings. That republic, which became the brightest light in the world. That republic was worth working for. It was worth fighting for. It was worth serving and saving. Where else could a boy of my humble background have had such opportunities? I was born 3 days before the Ides of January in the consulship of Caepio and Serranus, 63 years ago. I was born on my grandfather's farm in Arpinum, south of Rome. And while it's true, our family moved to Rome when I was 10, and we were well connected. It's those very connections that show what opportunities were available in Rome at that time. When King Philip of Macedonia wanted education for his son Alexander, he got Aristotle, a philosopher, to come up from Athens. And he had Aristotle teach the sons of his nobles so that Alexander would have educated friends to guide and advise him when he took the throne. But unless you were noble, you stood no chance in such an education. In Rome, it was completely different. We were not connected with the founders of the city. We were not patricians. But through hard work, we had advanced ourselves. By the time my brother Quintus and I came along, we owned land. We'd made a name for ourselves. We were connected with some of the leading citizens of the day. My mother, Helvia, was not above marrying a fuller, someone who cleaned togas. My father, he often said that the Tullius family was descended from the legendary King Tullus Attis of the Volscians. Whatever royal blood we may once have had, it's long diluted. As for me, I was a good student. I enjoyed literature. I enjoyed reading, poetry. When I was a boy, I remember I wrote a poem in tetrameters called Pontius Glaucus. Part of me always wanted to be a poet. Maybe all things considered, that would have been the best. But that's not what the fates had in store for me. In Rome, I studied under Philo the academic, and at the insistence of, and thanks to, friends of my father, I pursued a career in law with those eminent statesmen, the musii. I continued my proper training as a Roman young man, serving in the military under Sulla in our war against the Socii, those Italians who had been Rome's allies for centuries. I can tell you, I did not learn so much military strategy under Sulla as what a fierce man Sulla himself could be. Those of us who served under him were not surprised that he tried to strengthen Rome with his own physical might. And while I always shared his support for senatorial rule, I could never abide his strong-handed and tyrannical way of achieving it. He established prescriptions, lists of people that he thought should be killed to purify Rome, as he put it. How was that any different from our last king, Tarquinius Superbus, the dictatorship of Sulla, when we dared to go out of our homes? We walked through the streets in fear. And it was in such an environment that I began my career in law. People will be surprised to know this. But I've always been nervous when I begin to speak. I think it goes back to those times. Fear pervaded everyone, including me. I remember I had a case, a man named Sextus Roscius, came to me. His father had been murdered, and after the killing, his father's name had been put on the prescription list to make it seem legal. Now, this was done simply so that his father's property would not pass to him, his son. Property could be auctioned off publicly, and someone could purchase this estate for a knockdown price. Now, who do you imagine benefited from this? It was none other than Chrysogonus, the golden one of Sulla's inner circle. To take on this case was in a very real way to take on the dictator himself. Yet take it on I did. It was a case that could have guaranteed my death. Instead, it marked me out as the prime orator of Rome. Because I knew this was a republic worth fighting for, and I knew what is right should never yield to fear. I won that case. I soon had a flood of others, yet I managed to find some time to get away to Greece to expand my studies. I studied with eminent scholars, Antiochus of Ascalon. I went to Asia Minor, studied with Xenocles of Adramyttium, Dionysius of Magnesia, Menippus of Caria. Yet none of them had such a profound effect on my oratorical skills as Apollonius, son of Molon, with whom I studied on the island of Rhodes. Now, Apollonius knew no Latin. He had me declaim my speeches in Greek, and there is no finer training than to be forced to cast your thoughts in another language. It gave me precision, clarity, power. Gifts I've been grateful for to this day. In fact, I still remember the afternoon. Apollonius said to me, Cicero, you have my praise and admiration, and Greece, my pity and commiseration. Since those eloquence and arts that were her gifts alone, you will transfer to Rome. Somewhere in those years I got married. I wouldn't speak of it were it not for the fact it produced my children. Son Marcus, it was an everlasting disappointment. And my daughter Tulia, the light of my life. My wife Terentia was from a wealthy family, wealthier than mine. She never let me forget that. I think if she'd been born a man, she would have been my political rival. She took more interest in my affairs of state than most statesmen's wives. For it was at that time that I began my career in politics. The Romans used to call that pathway through elected office the cursus honorum. And indeed, it was once a course of honors. But I don't think we ever recovered after Sulla. We paved the way for men of power to take control unto themselves. When the toga yields to arms, there can be no one. Yet I ran for office, and I was elected to each office at the earliest legal age. Until at the age of 42, I found myself standing for the consulship of Rome. I ran with Lucius Sergius Catilina and Gaius Antonius Hybrida. People think Romans are so traditional, and we are. We are. But by that reason, we should have elected Antonius and Catilina. They were patricians, I was not. But patricians care more about losing their money. With the rumors going on around Catiline, they grew nervous. See, people heard that Catilina was planning to abolish all debt, which was good news for the lower classes, but not to those to whom the debt was owed. So the patricians banded together, they pooled their votes, and they elected one of their own, Antonius. And a novus homo, a new man in their eyes, me. I couldn't believe it. I knew I was popular from my previous elections, but to be elected consul of Rome, even Terentia was happy for me. Although likely as not, she was simply pleased at being consul's wife. Nonetheless, I had dreams. I had ideas. I was eager to take office. I had always been a student of history. And I thought back to the days when the Senate was strong and could find fault, even with an eminent commander like Fabius Maximus, because of his delaying tactics in his war with Hannibal. Cunctator, they called him, the delayer. That was a Senate filled with men of bold action. And I wanted to restore the Senate to such glory. I wanted to bring back the dignity of Rome. Once again, it seemed the fates had other plans. I'd just taken office in January. A case was brought before me of Gaius Rabirius. Gaius Rabirius was 80 years old if he was a day. And he was being charged with treason for actions he had taken 60 years before. And the consulship of Opimius and Fabius. In those days, Gaius Gracchus had stirred an uprising of the people. And the Senate, rightly concerned about the safety of the city, issued a decree that it had never issued before. It gave power to the consuls and said, see to it that the republic suffers no harm. And then left the consuls free in how to accomplish that. The consul Opimius raised a military force, crushed Gaius Gracchus' uprising. Several thousand people died in the fighting. A case was brought against the consul because the people who had died had been Roman citizens and had not been given a trial, as was their right. Consul Opimius simply claimed the authority given him by the Senate and was acquitted. Now here we were, 60 years later, and this old man, Rabirius, is being charged with treason. We hadn't had a treason trial since the reign of Tullus Hostilius. And if executed, if convicted, this old man would have been executed. Something seemed strange, and so I asked Gaius Julius Caesar, the man who brought the case, what was really behind it. Caesar was vague. He said something about treason not ever should be unpunished, something. It made no sense. The case ended in a mistrial. I never could shake the feeling that there was more to that case than met the eye. So my consulship began under a cloud, and I never really got out from under it. I tried to do things with the Senate. The Senate was slow moving. I should have known. I should have remembered. When I was a senator, I think when you get in a position of authority, you come to believe that you can actually accomplish things. Before you know it, it was summer. It's time to elect consuls for the following year. Catalina ran again, along with Decimus Junius Silanus and Lucius Licinius Murena. Catalina was running for consul, and yet we got word that Catalina was planning to assassinate the consuls, me. I took to wearing armor under my toga as I walked through the forum, occasionally letting the wool slip a bit so the people would see the armor and know they should not try to assassinate a sitting consul of Rome. Of course, the people saw through Catalina's insanity. They wisely elected Silanus and Murena, good men. And then we got evidence that Catalina was preparing a general slaughter, having failed to obtain power by legitimate means. He was going to use force to take Rome. And so in October of that year, the Senate once again passed a measure, the same measure it had passed for consuls Opimius and Fabius decades before, giving Antonius and me the authority to see to it that the Republic suffered no harm. My immediate thought was to do as Opimius had done, to raise a military force and crush this conspiracy. But I needed more information. I needed to know who precisely was in the conspiracy, and I needed to know that no one would oppose me. See, I couldn't help remembering the trial from just a few months before. If Caesar could bring a case against an elderly man like Rabirius for actions taken in his youth, actions taken at the direction of his consul, a consul empowered by the Senate, then clearly senatorial authority was not what it should be. And so I waited. I waited and I gathered evidence and I made a plan. And I came to find out that Catalina was amassing an army in the mountain passes of Etruria, made up of veterans from Sulla's army. And I realized if Catalina were to lead this army himself, he would be a hostis, a public enemy, no different from a foreign enemy, like Hannibal. And a hostis does not maintain the rights of a civis, a citizen. So my plan became to drive Catalina precisely where he wanted to go, to the head of his army, where he could then be killed in open battle. So in November, I called a meeting of the Senate. Everyone was there, even Catalina. No one wanted to sit near him. And for nearly an hour, I spoke, laying out the facts, what we knew about this conspiracy. In truth, we did not know everything. But it was important for Catalina to believe that we did. It was important for the other conspirators to believe that we knew who they were. the end of the speech, Catalina tried to speak, but the other senators, they shouted him down. They were calling for his death. And he fled the Senate. In the weeks and days that followed, we gathered further evidence, written evidence, implicating high-ranking members of the Senate in this conspiracy. We arrested 5 of them: Lentulus, Cethegus, Gabinius, Statilius, Caeparius. We brought them before the Senate and confronted them with the evidence of their treachery. Consul-elect Silanus proposed execution. And yet it was Caesar, again, who proposed something strange, something novel. He suggested that we put the 5 men under house arrest in various towns throughout Italy. It had never been done before. Fortunately, Marcus Porcius Cato, who always had the best interests of the Republic at heart, brought us back around to Silanus's view, and the Senate voted for summary execution. I remember the night of it very well. We took these 5 men, these 5 leaders of Rome. Lentulus had been an ex-praetor, by the gods. We led them to the Tullianum, the execution chamber. I was there. It was a small, dark, dank place. They were executed by strangling. I remember I came up from the stairs to the street, and there was a crowd of people gathered in torchlight to hear what had happened. And I announced to them one word: Vixerunt. They have lived, indicating that they were alive no more. And the people, thrilled that this danger had been averted, escorted me in a torchlit parade to my home, hailing me as the savior of Rome. Just a few weeks later, my consul Antonius, he led an army, defeated Catalina, and that traitor to the Republic was found dead. Then Charybdis opened her maw and swallowed everything. Caesar was elected consul a few years later, began his war in Gaul, and the Republic began its slide into the hands of power-hungry men. Men like Publius Clodius Pulcher. The man renounced his patrician status to become a plebeian, just so that he could get elected tribune of the people, a plebeian office, and work for my exile. See, his family and mine had never been close, and he saw this as an opportunity, I suppose, for some sort of revenge. He claimed that I was responsible for the execution of these 5 Roman citizens without giving them a trial. It was the same charge that had been brought before Consul Opimius decades before. I knew better than to assert the authority of the Senate. The Senate was weak. In fact, I was afraid for my life. I wasn't even sure that I could make it alive through the trial. So I fled to Macedonia, voluntary exile. Oh, the Senate recalled me the following year. They voted for my recall. Of course, I had done nothing wrong. Things were never the same. A few years after that, Clodius himself was murdered on the Appian Way. Caesar returned at the head of an army that he'd been ordered to disband by the Senate. Those of us who cared about Rome, we fled with Pompeius to Greece to build an army to fight Caesar. It didn't work. Caesar was victorious. We fled to Egypt. that boy king Ptolemy murdered Pompeius, beheaded him. It said that Caesar wept when he saw Pompey's head. I wonder, did he? Did he so? Those of us who were not involved with the army directly, we made our way back to Rome. Cato was the one to lead the army back across North Africa, where he made one of the boldest gestures I've ever seen, noblest gestures. Unwilling to live under the tyranny of Caesar, willing to use his own life as a symbol of what a free man in a free republic does, rather than have his life taken from him. Cato took his own. And I felt as if I were living in a tragedy by Aeschylus. We were in a dictatorship again. My daughter Tullia died in childbirth. Terentia and I were divorced soon after. Tried to console myself with another marriage. That was a mistake, quickly remedied by divorce a few months later. Violence continued to fill our streets, and just last year, Caesar himself was murdered before our very eyes in the Senate. And now I'm here, under prescription from Caesar's man, Marcus Antonius, fleeing for my life, trying to write an account probably no one will read. Seems to me we haven't come that far since the days of Sulla. I still remember part of that speech for Roscius, the end of it at any rate. Nam cum omnibus horis, aliquid trociter fieri videmus ad audimus, etiam qui natura mitissimi sumus, ad siduitate molestiarum, sensum omnem humanitatis ex animi submittimus. When at every hour we see and hear some atrocity taking place, even those of us who by nature are most gentle lose all sense of humanity from our souls by growing accustomed to the violence. Maybe Cato was right. He used his own life to make a statement. A statement for the republic that he had loved, that I have served since the days of my youth. Maybe Cato was right. I will not lose that last shred of humanity from my soul. The writing of this biography can wait. I must find my litter bearers. I must return to Rome.